All right, so today we're going to be looking at this YouTube video, kind of interesting.
Okay.
It's called Let Go and Trust God from this channel.
Okay.
Be Still Biblical Meditations.
Oh?
So we're diving deep into, letting go of worries and finding peace, but through this, Christian lens.
Mm-hmm.
I think this could be really helpful for anyone who's feeling kind of overwhelmed by life.
Yeah, for sure. Right off the bat, what really strikes me about this video is that it doesn't feel like it's just speaking to, devout Christians.
Yeah.
It starts by acknowledging all the heavy baggage we all carry around, right? Like that fear, discouragement, anxiety, stress,
Yeah.
just that general feeling of being weighed down.
For sure. I think everyone's felt that at some
Yeah,
point.
totally. Regardless of, your beliefs or anything like that.
Exactly. And then it kind of goes on to suggest that one way to deal with all of this is maybe surrendering those fears and burdens to God.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because it's not just about saying like a quick prayer and hoping for the best. Right.
This video really digs deeper into this idea of surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And it frames it as like an act of trust and faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's about acknowledging that there's a bigger picture, like a divine plan, even when we can't see it.
Yeah, it's like saying, okay, God, I'm letting go. You take the wheel. I trust you.
Yeah, totally.
And there's this one line in the video that really stood out to me. It says, you are in charge, the creator and king of all that is, has been, and will be.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a declaration of faith, like a way of releasing that need to control everything ourselves.
It is a really powerful statement, and I think it speaks to a core belief in a lot of Christian traditions.
Okay.
This idea that God is not only all-powerful, but also benevolent.
Right.
So surrendering control isn't about, giving in to some kind of arbitrary force.
Yeah.
It's about placing your trust in a loving God who has, your best interests at heart, even when things are tough.
Which, let's be real, they often are.
Yeah. But this video seems to suggest that those struggles aren't just random.
Right.
That God actually uses those struggles to shape us.
Yeah.
There's that part where it says, you transform us further and further into the likeness of your Son, Jesus Christ, turning even our problems into opportunities.
Yeah.
It's like saying that even the hard stuff is part of this larger process of growth and transformation.
And what's fascinating is how that concept challenges us to look beyond just our immediate circumstances and trust in this, longer term perspective. It's not about denying the pain or the difficulty,
Right.
but like finding meaning and purpose within it.
So it's not a passive acceptance of whatever life throws at you. It's like this active element to it too. This working with God to let him mold you through those challenges.
Totally.
But then the video takes this turn towards the practical.
Oh, yeah.
And it offers this guided breathing exercise.
Okay.
It seems almost counterintuitive.
Yeah, I can see that.
You're talking about surrendering to God, this huge concept, and then it's like, okay, now just breathe.
It's interesting how it brings it down to like such a simple act.
Yeah.
But there's a real wisdom in that because breathing is something we can control,
Right.
even when everything else feels totally chaotic.
Yeah.
And by focusing on our breath, we can kind of create this space of calm and clarity amidst the storm,
Right.
which can then open us up to that surrender that the video is talking about.
And the video actually makes this really beautiful connection between those two things.
Okay.
It says, every breath we take is a reminder to let go and trust you. You provide the very air that sustains us.
Mm.
And suddenly, something as basic as breathing becomes this act of faith,
Yeah.
this recognition of our dependence on something larger than ourselves.
It's almost poetic, right? It
Yeah.
takes this abstract theological concept and it grounds it in this very real, physical experience. And by doing so, it makes the concept more accessible and relatable.
But then it gets even more poetic, right? With this whole river analogy.
Oh, yeah, the river of life. It's a classic metaphor for, like, the journey of life, isn't it?
Right.
And the video uses it so effectively to illustrate this idea of surrendering to God's guidance, especially when things get rough.
It talks about how life, like a river, it has its smooth stretches, but then it also has its rapids.
Yeah.
And even when we get tossed around, maybe even go under for a bit, God is there like the current, guiding us, pulling us back to the surface. It's a really comforting image, especially when you're feeling lost or overwhelmed.
There's such a sense of safety and security in that image, right? Just the knowledge that even when we can't see where we're going, we're not alone.
Right.
That there's a force larger than ourselves carrying us along.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, this idea of surrender, the trust in God's plan, the breathing exercise, the river metaphor.
It is a lot to unpack.
What really resonated with you in all of this?
Honestly, for me, it's the combination of the grand and the simple, you
Yeah.
know? Like this vast concept of surrendering to God's will, but then grounding it in something as basic as breathing, as natural as a flowing river.
Right.
It makes it feel less intimidating, I think, and more achievable.
I agree.
And it makes me think about, other ways people approach these same challenges, because even if you don't, subscribe to the Christian faith,
Yeah.
I think there's something universally appealing about this idea of finding peace and strength in something larger than ourselves.
That's such a good point.
Which makes me wonder,
Yeah.
are there other paths that lead to that same sense of surrender and trust?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mm.
Because clearly people from all walks of life find ways to cope with uncertainty and fear,
For sure.
to find that inner calm amidst the chaos.
Definitely.
So how do other traditions and philosophies approach this?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in part 2.
Okay.
We'll delve into some different perspectives, from mindfulness to stoicism, even to secular therapy approaches, and we'll see how they compare to the ideas we've just discussed.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
Stay tuned. It's fascinating to think about those other paths that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The ones that lead to that same sense of peace and letting go, even if they don't explicitly involve a belief in God.
It makes you wonder what those roads look like,
Yeah.
What are those other ways people find that, solid ground when everything feels shaky?
Well, one path that comes to mind is mindfulness.
Okay.
It has roots in, a Buddhist traditions, but it's really taken off in secular settings as well.
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a buzzword I've heard a lot,
Sure.
but I'm not sure I totally get it.
Yeah.
How does just being present help with worry, which is usually, all about the past or the future?
That's a great question. I think that's the key insight, right? Worry really thrives on those what ifs and should haves.
Yeah.
And it kind of keeps us trapped in our heads spinning out all these different scenarios.
Right.
Mindfulness is almost like an antidote to that. It's
Yeah.
about gently guiding your attention back to your breath, to your senses, to the physical world around you. And it's not to ignore those worries, but to see them without getting swept away by them.
So instead of fighting that, the current of those thoughts,
Yeah.
you're kind of stepping out of the river for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding a place to just observe.
Exactly. It's about creating that space between you and the worry so you can choose how to respond instead of just reacting.
Right.
And, it reminds me of that breathing exercise in that video we were discussing.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're both tools for training your attention, for finding that stillness within.
That's a really good connection.
Yeah.
So even though mindfulness comes from this totally different tradition,
Mm-hmm.
it shares that practical element with the Christian approach to letting go.
Right.
That focus on using the breath to kind of anchor yourself in the present.
Totally. And often mindfulness practices go hand in hand with meditation,
Okay.
which further develops that mental discipline. It's like building a muscle.
Right.
The ability to let go of unhelpful thoughts and choose where you focus your energy.
So in a way, both mindfulness and the Christian perspective are both pointing towards a form of surrender,
Yeah,
just surrendering to maybe different things.
right.
One is about letting go of the need to control our thoughts, and the other is about surrendering to, a higher power.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how these different paths, while unique,
Yeah.
they can ultimately lead to similar destinations like inner peace and a sense of being grounded, amidst the chaos.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Christianity and mindfulness both offering these ways to kind of loosen the grip of worry.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what other paths are out there?
Well, let's shift gears a bit and consider Stoicism.
Okay.
It's an ancient philosophy, but it's had this resurgence lately, especially for people looking for practical wisdom on dealing with tough times.
Stoicism.
Yeah.
I think I know the name,
Yeah.
but that's about it. How does it approach this whole letting go thing?
Well, the Stoics were all about focusing on what you can control.
Okay.
So your thoughts, your actions, your reactions,
Right.
and accepting what you can't control.
Okay.
So external events, other people's choices, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
They believed that a lot of our suffering comes from resisting reality,
Yep.
from wishing things were different than they are.
So it's about recognizing that you can't control the river, but you can choose how you navigate it.
Exactly.
Like choosing your attitude even when you're stuck in those rapids.
Exactly. And it's not about, being passive or denying your emotions.
Okay.
It's about facing them head on, but choosing not to be ruled by them.
Right.
The Stoics believed that true freedom comes from that, like, inner mastery,
Mm-hmm.
from not being at the mercy of external circumstances.
I'm starting to see some parallels here.
Oh, yeah.
Stoicism and Christianity both seem to emphasize this idea of acceptance.
Okay.
Accepting God's plan in one case, accepting the limitations of your control in the other.
Right.
But I also see a difference.
Okay.
Christianity seems more focused on surrendering to something outside yourself,
Right.
while Stoicism is more about, like, taking charge of your inner world.
You've hit on a key distinction there.
Okay.
It's about, like, where that power lies, whether
Yes.
it's sourced from this, like, divine being or cultivated within oneself.
Right.
But despite that difference, I think they both offer a framework for finding peace and strength amidst uncertainty.
Okay, so we've got Christianity, mindfulness, Stoicism, all offering different angles on finding that calm in the storm.
Yeah.
Is there one more path we could explore before we wrap up part 2?
How about we bring it back to the present day and look at cognitive behavioral therapy?
Okay. Or CBT.
CBT, I've definitely heard of that.
Yeah.
But how does therapy fit into this conversation about letting go of worry?
Well, CBT focuses on identifying those negative thought patterns that kind of fuel anxiety.
And then challenging them, replacing them with more helpful, balanced ones. It's about actively shaping your inner dialogue, not just trying to ignore it.
So instead of just saying, don't worry, be happy,
Yeah.
it's about understanding why you're worrying.
Yeah.
And then actually doing something to change that thought process.
Exactly. CBT gives you these practical techniques for recognizing those, like, irrational thought loops
Okay.
and then reframing them.
Right.
It's like becoming your own inner coach, guiding yourself towards a more, like, realistic and positive outlook.
I see a real difference here.
Yeah.
It seems like while mindfulness, Stoicism, and Christianity are all about accepting things as they are, CBT seems more action-oriented.
Yeah.
It's about taking control and changing your mental habit.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Awesome.
It's a different kind of empowerment. Instead of surrendering to something outside yourself, you're becoming like the agent of change in your own mind.
Wow, this is really expanding my understanding of how people approach worry and find peace. Yeah, we've got these 4 paths: Christianity, mindfulness, Stoicism, CBT,
It's a lot.
all coming at it from different angles, but with that shared goal of helping us weather those, the storms of life.
It's amazing how these diverse perspectives highlight just, like, the complexity of the human experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
But there's also something so hopeful about it too, right?
totally.
It means there are multiple paths to finding peace, to navigating those, those difficult emotions.
It's like they're all pieces of the same puzzle, different approaches to solving the same, fundamental human problem.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, this has been fascinating so far.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear your final thoughts in part 3.
Okay.
As we bring all these threads together, what key takeaways do you think we should leave our listener with?
Ooh, I'm excited to share those final thoughts with you and our listener.
Great.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll delve deeper into the connections between these different paths and consider what it all means for finding peace in our own lives.
Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive.
Back for more.
We've been on this journey kind of exploring all these different paths to letting go of worry and finding that sense of peace. And it's amazing how many different approaches there are out there.
It really is. We've gone from, like, surrendering to a higher power with Christianity, to training our minds with mindfulness and CBT, to finding strength and acceptance with Stoicism.
Right. And it seems like even though these paths are, like, distinct in a lot of ways, they all converge on this similar destination.
Yeah.
This, like, sense of calm, of being grounded even when, life throws those inevitable curveballs.
I agree. It's like they're all different maps leading to the same, like, hidden treasure, that
Yeah.
inner peace that we're all, searching for.
Exactly. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you would want our listener to walk away with? What are, like, the golden nuggets that connect all of these different approaches?
Well, one big takeaway for me is just that, we don't have to be victims of our worries. We're not powerless, whether it's through faith or, mental discipline, or even just changing our thought patterns.
Yeah.
All of these paths offer tools for taking back control, for finding that space between, like, stimulus and response, where we can choose how we react.
It's such an empowering message.
It is.
Like, you're not just a leaf in the wind, you've got a paddle.
Yeah.
You can steer,
Yeah.
But choosing to steer can be tough. And there's another thing that keeps popping up.
What's that?
Acceptance.
I.
Whether it's accepting God's plan or accepting the limitations of our control, or even just accepting like our messy, imperfect thoughts and feelings,
Right.
it seems like such a key part of this whole journey.
Acceptance is huge, and I think it's often misunderstood.
Okay.
You know, people think it means like giving up or becoming passive.
Right.
But it's really about like radical honesty.
Okay.
It's about saying, okay, this is what is, I can't change it, so how can I work with it?
Yeah.
How can I find peace within, this reality? And I think once you accept the things that you can't change,
Yeah.
you free up so much energy to focus on what you can.
It's like that serenity prayer, right?
Yeah.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that wisdom that seems to be at the heart of all of these approaches.
I think so too. It's
Ah.
about finding that balance between surrender and action,
Yeah.
between letting go and stepping up.
Right.
Sometimes the wisest move is to surrender to the flow, to trust that things will work out.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it's about rolling up our sleeves and actually shaping our reality.
For sure.
And knowing which approach to use, that's where the real wisdom lies.
It's a beautiful dance,
It is.
like learning to move with the rhythm of life,
Yeah.
to know when to push and when to let go.
And ultimately, I think that's what this whole deep dive has been all about.
Holding.
Exploring the different ways that we can find that rhythm, that inner harmony, even amidst the chaos.
Yeah. And what's so encouraging is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Yeah.
It's about finding what resonates with you, what speaks to your heart, your experiences, your beliefs.
And that's what we hope you'll take away from this deep dive.
For sure.
We've given you a glimpse of these 4 different paths, but there are countless others out there.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to keep exploring, to keep searching for those tools and practices that help you find your own unique path to peace and well-being.
Could not have said it better myself.
Well, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.